Welcome, everybody, to the show formerly known as the Bogey Free Podcast. New title, very aptly named. I am joined by a good buddy of mine, Justin Bates. Justin and I met for the first time playing PGA Tour Canada's Q School, probably 7 years now. Justin, do you think that's correct?
2016. So it's the only
Yeah,
year I
something like
played. So I
that.
remember it.
And shortly after, we probably started talking about having a show like this together. And here we are, 6-7 years later, finally making it happen. We are presented once again by the Game Plus Network. Super stoked to be here tonight with Justin. Got a great show planned for you all. So I kind of buried the lead there, if you will, in the sense that we are both professional golfers. But I think the great dynamic that we can have here comes from the fact that I am much more statistically inclined. Like, I studied economics and statistics in college. And so, of course, I got you were a double major so that you could use it to become a professional golfer, kind of dig for years from my friends, but turn that into sports betting and DFS success that really propelled my golf career of all things. And so I would say that my betting process is probably about 95% statistical, and only like 5% comes from the experience and the things that I've learned as a player myself. Justin, I feel like you lean much more into the experience of a golfer. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your process?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll start by saying I'm mostly a DFS guy. I dabble in some head-to-head matchups. I don't play a lot of outrights. Occasionally, I've got one this week. And then when it comes to DFS, I'm not a max entry guy. I'm a single entry or three max guy. That's just always the way where I've had my most success. I'm very much I'm a big believer in elite talent wins. So I'm always trying to find how many elite talent guys can I get into one lineup. I've said for many years, you're a great example, right? So I don't know who's the 75th place. I think they're 78 this week. So who the 75th best player in the field is, they could replace them with you on the driving range and nobody would know a difference. But if you put you in there and you take out Scheffler, people are going to be like, oh, who's this guy, right? So there's I'm always looking for the elite talent, definitely some form, how you're playing, touch of course fit. I think that absolutely matters, especially I think I'm more into sustained success at a course, not so much, oh, he played there one time and played good, or he played really good there last year after missing the cut 5 years in a row. It sounds to me like the dude just got his act together for that year, right? So, yeah, I would say that we're pretty different. I mean, I think that we both understand golf and the fact of building lineups or who to bet on and stuff like that. And not to dive too far into this, but I will never roster a guy that won the week before.
Interesting. That is one that we'll talk about, because I feel like that's one of those things that, to me, like, I think I've made a good amount of money in DFS playing guys who won the previous week, just because I know they're coming with an ownership discount, because you are certainly not the only one who sort of has that theory. So I feel like sometimes I'll get a guy who ordinarily would be 25% at his price or something at 5 to 10% just because he won the previous week. Perhaps the best answer is somewhere in the middle. Like it's picking and choosing, finding the guys who have the mindset to win the next week, that sort of thing. Let's move on a little bit. Before we jump into this specific week, we were talking a little bit backstage about live golf. And I do want to touch on this a little, because I feel like it's certainly sparking a ton of conversation on Twitter and just in the golf world overall. And I really like the different take that you have on it. And I think we both are more capable, or at least more inclined, to look at it from the lens of the players, and particularly the guys who are really chasing the dream, maybe not established on tour like a lot of the guys who are actually going over to live, and the way in which it impacts them more so than how it impacts the fans. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your take on live, and why you're actually a supporter of the idea and the concept as a whole?
Yeah, and that's the key. The first thing I want to get across is that I'm a huge supporter of the idea. I hate where the money's coming from. I hate that side of it. I mean, the way that it's happened, but I'm a huge, let's start with the PGA Tour found 200 million hiding in the corner for the ad events. They automatically up the Corn Ferry purses. Canada, I would expect Canada and Latin America to get a similar bump pretty soon. I don't know if they've announced yet.
For those who don't know, one of the things that Justin's referring to there is maybe the biggest change this year is that Corn Ferry guys are guaranteed $500,000 for the year. If they miss every cut at the end of the season, they get a check for $500,000. The other big one is for guys who don't have that status and are able to play their way into an event, whether it's Monday qualifying, anything like that. There's now a $5,000 minimum. So even if you miss the cut, you're getting $5,000. They called it like a missed cut stipend or something like that, basically for travel expenses, all those things. So the money that the PGA Tour found isn't just being used to up the FedEx Cup reward, that kind of thing. It's also going to the guys who are chasing a dream. That I think is an awesome point that you're making.
And I'm not sure that the general public understands how many guys. I mean, I don't play now, but I played until I was 37 or 8 years old. I'm 41 now, but I Mondayed into a bunch of events back, not a bunch, a handful of events back in the day, and I played Monday qualifier after Monday qualifier. I had a week, I had 5 weeks in a row where I never shot higher than 67. Only got into one, what was then, I think it was nationwide tour, maybe. I mean, but I probably spent $12,000 in a 5-week span driving around, and then get into the event. You had caddy expenses, hotel, everything there. I think with Liv, to be on track with that, what Liv has done is, well, let's start with the PGA Tour. What the PGA Tour did is they killed mini tour golf in the U.S. So when I turned pro in 2004, you had Adams Tour, Tight Lies Tour, Hooters Tour, Tar Heel Tour. I mean, you saw purses get up to $200,000. I mean, really good players: Chad Campbell, Martin Flores, Zach Johnson, huge Hooters Tour success, right? And now everybody that can afford to do it is going to Canada, Latin America. So it's killed all those opportunities for people that can't. They could afford the $800 entry, but they can't afford the $800 to $1,000 entry plus the travel expenses of another $1,000. I mean, when I played in Latin America, I mean, to go to Mazatlan, Mexico, I was $2,200 when I stepped on the tee into the event.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are with a lot of talent that can't afford to do that. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, there've been a lot of stories of guys who they get into a Corn Ferry event through money qualifying or something like that, and then they don't make the cut, and they realize, damn, I would have saved myself $2,500 if I had just played like crap on Monday instead of getting in. And so, I think 100%, like what the greatest effect that Liv has had on the PGA Tour is providing that pressure that actually got them to step up. And credit to the tour for actually doing it. Like they could have just been really stubborn and not done anything and said, where the money's coming from is terrible. You're an asshole if you go play there. They actually did make an effort and step up in that regard. Now, what does that say about the fact that they were kind of hiding or sitting on all that money beforehand? Certainly another discussion, and probably for another day.
They didn't grow a tree in the backyard and say, "Oh, look at all these hundreds! I can go fund all this for my players." But I just think the end game will be really good here. I think Monahan probably needs to go. He fell behind the times, and I just think that the end game, if we can get this all right. And I think that a new commissioner could come in and go back to those Liv guys and say, hey, like, I understand why you did what you did. Let's make this all right and be one tour again and get this back to the way it should be. Let's make amends with them. Because there's certain guys. I mean, listen, Matt Jones. I mean, how do you say no? I mean, you think about your family. I mean, I don't know if you saw, was it Abraham Answer that had the greatest interview? He's like, I came from nothing, and now I created generational wealth.
Yeah.
I mean,
I also loved Varner's answer or the post he made on Instagram, which was basically like, look, I understand that this money isn't coming from the best place, but with that money, I can do so much. He has like his Harold Varner Foundation. That obviously, like, he's making a huge impact in the community in which he grew up and the community that he credits to kind of like giving him the success in the life that he's had. So there are ways to handle yourself in going to live. And I think those two guys are maybe a better example than like Patrick Reed, surprise, surprise, and
Yeah.
how they're doing it. But we're already 10 minutes in. We only have 24 minutes for the show.
All right,
So we got
let's
to
go.
move on to this week, because otherwise we'll be here for an hour. And I want to get back to my Phillies game as well. Not only do we have a limited amount of time on the show, but we've got my Phillies to get back to. So let's talk a little bit about Congaree Golf Club and the CJ Cup this week. For anyone who has watched previously, you know that I'm pretty much all about my course fit model. And for those who don't know, and for yourself, Justin, basically what I do is I run a regression model based on the course histories for every player who has ever played that golf course in my database, or at least has met a minimum rounds threshold. And essentially the model tells me which skills are going to best translate into success at the course. At this course, we don't have the sufficient data to run that course fit model. So I'm stuck leaning more into just my baseline projections and like what I call true talent models, which basically give me a generic like course neutral projection for this is a guy's percentage to finish top 10 in the week, or this is his expected win rate throughout the rest of the year, that kind of thing. But I will say, I did notice that this course is designed by Tom Fazio, and Fazio does have a couple courses on tour, namely PGA National and Quail Hollow. Now with Quail Hollow, he wasn't the actual course architect, but he was in charge of the redesign. Both of those courses do have a very specific and powerful course fit model, emphasizing off the tee play and around the green play above all else. So I do think what I'm going to try to do this week is find the guys who are underpriced for their baseline talent level and who will directionally benefit if Congaree Golf Club also fits this only two course sample Tom Fazio pattern. So that's going to be my sort of approach and plan of attack this week. What are you looking for at Congaree Golf Club here, Justin?
I would also throw in a bit of when looking at golf courses, and I don't do this near to the extent as you do, but I do a little bit. The course in Houston, Memorial Park, I think has a lot of similar characteristics with the runoffs and the tight line chipping. So I think the course is a little bit more, everybody says it's long and wide. The way that they have this thing set up, they're trying to make it similar to like an Australian type golf course, I think is what he said, that's what he's trying to do. And so therefore firm, fast fairways, ball's going to run out a lot, firm greens, runoffs all around, tons of sand. So I love, I mean, once again, I'm going to go to talent A, but I love guys that are good chippers. And when I say good chippers, I think that this is where like we're different in stats. Stats are misleading because I want the guys that are good tight lie chippers, right? If it's runoff area, we're not looking for a guy that chips great at the US Open where every shot in the rough is a bunker shot. You know what I mean? You're looking for guys that make good contact off a tight lie. I would even go to that. So an interesting thing about Augusta, I hate to go to that extreme, but they mow every fairway back into the grain. So when you're chipping, you're always into the grain. You got to hit all those chips really, really good. And I mean, that's really the those things right there is why Spieth is in my DFS single this week is just that. I mean, that fit in itself.
Well, it's cool that you mentioned that and bring that sort of example from Augusta in play, because I can tell you from memory that Augusta is another course that really emphasizes the predictive power of around the green play. And so it sort of leans into what you're saying in the sense that the difficult conditions really separate the best short game players from the worst. Like you have to not just have the creativity that like Bubba Watson and Hideki Matsuyama have around the green, but you also have the consistency of contact and the conviction to take risky type of shots when that's what's demanded around the green. Like I think one of the best examples is if you're long right of 11 green and you're chipping back and you're facing a slope that runs right to that water, do you have the conviction to just really fly underneath the ball, get that spin and elevation to stop the ball and not kind of alligator arms it and blade it into the water, that sort of thing. So it does show up in the predictive power. And that's actually one of, I think, the real strengths of the course fit model is that it's a predictive model and not a descriptive one. So it's not telling you like historically guys who have gained the most strokes here around the green win. It's that this is a skill set that translates into success.
Right. And I think the only thing that I would worry about here is, and I don't know, I haven't seen enough, and like you were talking about not seeing it, I don't know how many guys are going to be able to putt from around the green in the tight
Mhm.
lies. A place like Augusta, you can't do that. But
Right.
one of the big deals that one of the things that the reasons I like Fleetwood this week is because I think you'll see him putt from a lot of places to kind of hide, and that's why I think his price is so wrong because he can hide some of that with the ability to do that. Whereas Augusta, it's always in the grain. You just can't do it. So it's kind of different idea, but that's kind of where it came from.
Speaking of Fleetwood, Quan, if you can throw up Justin's outright bet this week, it is Tommy Fleetwood 80-1 DraftKings Sportsbook. You did talk a little bit about him right there. I will add real quickly. It's interesting with Fleetwood because I still have his baseline strokes gain around the green as actually being the strength of his game. So if all that does come to fruition, where there's this added emphasis on around the green play, I do think that leans into one of his strengths. And then the other thing with Tommy is we talked about this potential for an added emphasis on off the tee play. When Tommy was the best version of himself, maybe 5 years ago, whatever it was, off the tee was one of his biggest strengths. He has since kind of lost that, but maybe showing signs of regaining it. So I do really like this bet. I think the price 80-1 is fantastic. And actually, in my betting preview, one of the things that I write up is like the largest price discrepancies from one sports book to the other, or to the next, and basically looking for the largest discrepancies, the places where odds shopping can be the most valuable. Tommy's 80-1 at DraftKings is certainly one of those examples because he's as low as I think like 50 or 55 elsewhere. Anything else you want to add about the Fleetwood outright here?
No, and that's where I would expect him to be. 50-45, 50-1 is about what I would expect. But once again, we're talking, he's one of those guys that if he goes out there and he has his A game, right? He has the ability to go win a golf tournament. You got some of those guys that are in that 70-90-1 that probably have never won. They might have a string of recent top tens or whatever it may be, but I'm just not sure that, at that price to give. I mean, I don't put him on the elite tier, but he's right behind the elite tier to me. So he was the one that just kind of stuck out as the wrong price. I mean, I think the only other one that I even considered was Hatton, and I just thought his number was just a touch too short for what I could get at.
Yeah, I like that call too. And really, like if you're talking about two guys who have correlated skill sets, Fleetwood and Hatton are going to be right up there at the top. Both are outstanding around the green. Both have decent length off the tee, but their one bugaboo might be accuracy off the tee, and then pretty strong with their irons and pretty strong putting. So I certainly see that correlation as well. Our board George, no surprise here, is in the chat saying it's blasphemous that there is no Rory outright between us. I will say it's funny. I talked about how Quail Hollow is a Tom Fazio redesign. Nobody owns a course the way Rory owns Quail Hollow, so maybe we should have a Rory outright. But
Well, I literally have in my notes like Rory is a worthy favorite. Like I
Yeah.
literally I mean, it just with this much elite talent, I can't back. I think I saw 6.5-1. I think the last I saw it at the book that I saw it. I mean, I might be higher if you at DK or something, but I don't disagree with him too. Like if you were gonna just wanted to focus in on one thing. Matter of fact, one of my matchup bets is I played Rory over Rahm. I mean, that's one of
I
my
like it.
threes. So like,
Yeah, I was. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, it was like minus 120, minus 125. It wasn't like super juicy, and so that was one that stuck out. So he's right. I mean, I can definitely see but like I said, it's just that number's too short for me to play an outright on.
Well, real quick, we don't want to give him too much credit because he would say that no matter where we were at, no matter who was
Okay.
in the field, no matter what form Rory was in. Rory could be out of golf for 3 years and George will still be saying that. But I will say I was surprised to see Rory has a very clear edge in my true talent models for both top 10 rate, win rate, and expected wins rate, which is a data golf metric. And also in my baseline strokes gain projections, Scheffler is second at 1.8. Rahm is third at 1.76. Rory is first by a very strong amount, all the way at 2.05. So he is kind of separating from everybody else. And now he's coming to a course where he might be a perfect fit if this course follows the same Tom Fazio pattern as we've seen elsewhere. Getting into my outrights, though, we just talked about the correlation between Fleetwood and Hatton. Well, there might not be a golfer more correlated to Rory McIlroy than Cameron Young. Once again at 29-1. I don't understand why his prices are as high as they are, but we're getting him at 29-1 once again at FanDuel Sportsbook. I think he was only as short as like 25-1 elsewhere, so not that important that you're getting the best price on him. It's pretty even across the board, but I actually think Cameron Young is probably the best driver of the golf ball in the world now. It's definitely between he, Rory, and Rahm. It's a three-headed monster at the top. So this course really has a chance to perfectly lean into his strengths. He's also become one of the better short game players in the world and sort of came out of nowhere in that regard, because even after he had broken out, like with his second place finish at Riviera, his around the green play was actually kind of standing out as a potential weakness of his. And then I believe it was starting at Sawgrass, and throughout the rest of the year, he was just awesome consistently with his short game. So I think this sets up really nicely for him, and he's a guy I want to buy low on anyway. He wouldn't have to stand out as a potential course fit specialist for me to love him at this number. So he is my first play. And then Luke List, 150-1, Bet Rivers. Important to note once again that part of the Luke List show, as George saying, wouldn't it be a Blick show without a Luke List or Benny on bet? Funny enough, I almost included Benny on here because I saw he was 250-1 in some places. But the Bet Rivers bet is in large part just due to the fact that I get to place an each way here and get really favorable odds on a top 6 for Luke List. So this is not just about the potential to win. My only hesitation here, and I actually haven't placed this bet yet, I'm curious your thoughts on it, Justin, is one of the things that we've seen from List is that historically around the green has been one of his strengths. And in the last 6 months or so, his short game has really been an issue. So I wish we had the strokes gain data from last week to know if his pretty stellar performance last week was in large part because he had a bounce back around the green, or if you kind of think that that's still lacking. Because if it's lacking, I don't like this price for him. But if it's back, I love it.
So I'll be honest, I played Straka over List. As I told you before, I love Straka this week. And that's literally my only other matchup because of that problem with List around the green. I think that the only thing that you gain from List is if he goes, he's going to go. He's going to be in contention. He's not afraid to make a million birdies. So I don't mind that as an outright. I think you're going to know after day one where you stand.
I completely agree. I remember he was a conviction play of mine, I believe, at Muirfield this year for the Memorial. And it was exactly that. It was I was leaning into the fact that he makes a ton of birdies and he seems to perform better on more difficult golf courses. And in large part, that's because historically he has been off the tee and around the green, his strengths, good iron player, but then a terrible putter. So this is the type of place where as long as this course fits the pattern, he can really excel here. So I do like it. I don't know. I don't quite have the conviction on it because we haven't seen the around the green play bounce back. Last thing, we were asked not about our betting, but give me a highlight of yours as a player throughout the years. Just a moment you can recall as, making the pursuit of golf all worth it.
Man, I mean, I've been around so long. That's that's a loaded question. I would say what propelled me to even do this is in 01. I started playing golf in 1998. I was 16. In 01, I qualified for the USAM in a 3-for-1 playoff. And I thought I was good, but going out there, I played practice round in that year with James Driscoll and Jeff Quinney. And I think playing with those guys in a practice round, I was like, all right, I know how, this is a different level good than what I ever knew. Nobody in my family played golf. I didn't know anything about golf. I just quit playing everything else when I was 16, and decided to start playing. And then I would start playing in college and kind of took off. So I think that would probably be what I would lean on is the career changing moment of not that I was good then, but how good I had to try to get to get there.
Yeah. Motivating. Absolutely. My answer is actually a pretty easy one. I don't know how I would have answered this a year and a half ago, but last year I was fortunate enough to win the Pennsylvania Open. And I think the thing that made it the most special for me was I had one of my best friends, Scott, on the bag that week. And on the 11th hole of the last day, 114-degree heat index, which I know is nothing for you down in Texas, but up here, we don't get that very often. So on the 11th hole, he actually got heat stroke, and my dad ended up on the bag for the last 7 holes of regulation and the 4 playoff holes, which made it all the more special to close that one out. Appreciate that question. It was a fun way to end the show. For Justin, for myself, for FTN, and for the Game Plus Network, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time.
Yep. Thanks.